you have to have some kind of relation with all other states. So, how are these relations established? They are established through ambassadors or envoys. They are called dutas. They are doots who will be of three different kinds. So, there are three types of ambassadors. One is called the Nistrishtat, then Parimitat, and there is the Shasanhar, the Western philosophy about just war. So we have our own policy of Dharma Vijay. And all these things really need to be understood in the context of each other, the Western philosophy of war and ours. I'm hoping somebody is doing this somewhere. This has been a wonderful series of talks on every aspect of the Saptang state. And I am now on to what is my personal favorite, although I shouldn't have favorites, but Mitra or international relations or diplomacy, geostrategic moves. The way they are put together in the Arthashastra is fascinating and I also think useful. So today we will talk at length of Mitra, but I must start with something I have been meaning to talk of for the past 3 or 4 times, and a number of people have actually asked me about this because it's a top of the mind issue for all of us even today. Corruption in public life. So corruption in public life has been something of a hot issue for everyone. I've been asked questions about it, and in each and every talk, I have said, "Okay, today I'll find time for it," but that time had not come. So in this last talk, I will start with corruption. Now, Chanakya or Kautilya had a very good idea of human nature, had a very good idea of how people operated and what they actually did in very many practical circumstances. So, this is a practical manual. Therefore, the way public servants behaved has also been dealt with very practically in this manual in the Arthashastra. Now, it is to be remembered that the Mauryans had a huge, humongous, complicated, widespread bureaucracy. To run their kingdom, they were dependent on bureaucrats. They were dependent on public servants because they had a very big state sector. Then they had a private sector which was regulated with many, many rules, regulations, checks, balances, etc. by the state. So both the public sector as well as the oversight of the private sector, obviously it was all done by public servants. A talk on administration, and you remember the around more than 30, 40 departments that were there in the Arthashastra and the different levels of government servants which were there. So how did they all work? Was it some kind of utopia that they were all perfect workers and they all loved their king and their country so much that they never thought of getting appropriating anything for themselves, never thought of embezzlement? Of course not, because people are people, and it's always greed, selfishness, the desire for more, the desire to get something which is not yours is part of human nature and it remains. So how has Kautilya in his manual dealt with this? First of all, he realizes that corruption is endemic to public life and public servants just cannot resist the temptation to embezzle. And he has some very, very famous uh, shloks on this. So instead of telling you the Sanskrit ones, today I will tell you the English ones so that they are easy to understand. And these have become part of our normal daily discussions also on corruption. So, what is one of the main ones? Just as it is not possible not to taste honey or poison placed on the surface of the tongue, even so, it is not possible for one dealing with the money of the king not to taste the money in however small quantities. Just as a fish moving inside water cannot be known when drinking water, even so, officers appointed for carrying out works cannot be known while appropriating money. So, as fish drink water as they are swimming in the sea, you don't know how much they've had. Similar is the situation of public servants and public officers. It is possible to know even the path of birds flying in the sky, but not the ways of officers moving with their intentions concealed. So if public servants get down to stealing from the exchequer, to stealing from the storehouses, very, very difficult to check them. But of course, our Cortelian bureaucracy does not give up on this. And you will see how many systems were put in place to keep corruption in check. This was from book 2, where a number of things are there about administration, and I will come back to book 2 of Arthashastra. But let me tell you of the institutions which were in place to keep corruption in check. And you will realize that such institutions, some of them still exist. So, what was the first one? The first one was the Akshapatal Adhyaksh, the Akshapatal Adhyaksh, or the Comptroller and Auditor General. Now, there was a finance minister. I told you yesterday while we were looking at Kosh and finance and public finance. But this record keeping of the Akshapatal Adhyaksh was completely different. So, what happened? It acted as a kind of check. So, the main department head, suppose it was a department of horses or elephants, they or forest resources. So, they submitted their accounts. Remember, at the end of the year, they submitted their accounts, what we would today call July 31st. They submitted their accounts on that day. So, okay, fine. Now, a separate set of records was kept by this whole setup of the Akshapatal Adhyaksh. And this was then checked with the actual records which were submitted by the public servants. And if there was a discrepancy in that, I'll come to the punishments, etc. Not only did he have a separate system of maintaining the records, he also had his own set of spies. I have mentioned the spies of the Home Minister and the Finance Minister, which were embedded in each and every department to keep an eye out on what is happening. Other than that, this Akshapatal Adhyaksh, the Comptroller and Auditor General, also had spies of his own. Now, what were the kind of records that Akshapatal Adhyaksh maintained? So, every activity of each state department, what was the working of the factories and what was the production in them, the prices, samples, and standards of measuring instruments for various kinds of goods. There, the laws, transactions, customs, and regulations, etc. What is made over to the king, a list of that. Payments made to foreign princes. So you see that it was a complete and thorough, comprehensive record house. The same can be said today of the Comptroller and Auditor General. Similar kind of very comprehensive records of everything are checked. They are not separately kept. That is a very big difference. Please note. The CAG does not keep separate records of his or her own today. They check the records of the different government departments, but in those times, Kautilya says that the Akshapatal Adhyaksh should have a separate set of records to check if there is any corruption or misappropriation happening. Now, suppose some misappropriation is found by the Akshapatal Adhyaksh, then he has to levy fines. So there are certain gurus. I told you that the tradition of the Arthashastra of the Saptanga state is a very old one. So many earlier gurus have said that okay, if a person expropriates certain amount of money, then that much will be recovered from him. But there are other people who say that 8 times that amount should be prescribed as punishment. There are even others who say 10 times the amount expropriated or 20 times the amount expropriated. So you can see that this would completely wipe out that person normally. Kautilya, however, says that whatever fine has to be given, you have to see what has been taken, what are the circumstances, and then decide. So he leaves a lot to the discretion of the superior officer, of the checking officer. There is a very complicated system of fines, and there are a whole number of shlokas on that. So if he has done this, then this will happen. If he has stolen from this, then this will happen. And that, of course, those are very specific circumstances. All of them may not apply to us. By the way, one interesting thing is that suppose there were some records that you got, and those records did not match with reality. Then you try to eat up that paper, or you try to swallow that paper or destroy that paper. You were fined for that also. So you were not able to eat those records. So swallow them just in case they were not matching with everything else that was being presented. So this is corruption as far as the Akshapatal Adhyaksh is concerned. This is how he is supposed to do. That's one check and balance. Now the other one, the more a mainstream one, because this one, Akshay Patel Adhyaksh, worked a little away from the rest of the administration. What did the administrative head, who is the Samahartri, what did he do? So, in book two, there is a whole list of things that the Samahartri should be careful of. There are many methods of misappropriation of revenue. These methods of misappropriation of revenue are so detailed that it is extremely difficult to, in a short talk like this, to actually give you each and every one of them. But I will give you a kind of classification. What kind of things were seen as corruption? So there were some, again, today I'm keeping it completely in English so that it's easier to understand, because these are extremely difficult concepts and some of them have to be understood uh, with some difficulty given the change in circumstances then and now. So the kind of causes of depletion of the treasury, which means how is the money of the kingdom expropriated or taken away by public servants. This is by hindrance, lending, trading, concealment, causing loss, use, interchange, and misappropriation. All these are defined. For example, what is hindrance? If you are supposed to do something and you didn't do it, you were supposed to do something and create something, or get three elephants or so much firewood from the forest, and you did not do it. You got it, but you did not give it to the treasury. All these are called hindrance. And for that, I'm just giving you a taste of what he says. The fine is 1/10. But in case you take something from the treasury and lend it to someone else and then get the interest, in that case the fine is double of what you have earned. So similarly, all these are there. I'll go to misappropriation and embezzlement, because there are 40 different ways of embezzlement listed in book 2 chapter 8. 40 different ways of embezzlement. I will, and in fact, he says that the ways of embezzlement are 40, and then he starts listing. So, and so many of them are very, very technical and nuanced. So, what has accrued first is realized afterwards. What is accrued later is realized first. So, you see, these are financial concepts. And somebody who's very financially clever can play around with these things and make money for himself. But all these things are very clearly kind of set out in this particular shlok. It's a very long one. So, and there are things like over invoicing, under invoicing. No, that's not written in the Arthashastra. I'm explaining it using those words because these are more familiar to us. Also, making a wrong bill. You may be selling gold and diamonds and you say that you're selling iron, that kind of thing. Then, discrepancy in terms of time. So, for those of you who are interested, you can read 2.8.20. It's a long, long, long shlok, and these 40 ways of embezzlement are given in that. All these have to be noted by the Samahartri. Now, suppose he finds something like this, then what does he do? What is he supposed to do? So, he is supposed to conduct an investigation. This investigation is conducted through interrogation of the officer concerned, of the people in that particular department, and then he has to arrive at his conclusion. What has happened? Was some money actually taken away from the treasury? Is this person actually corrupt? Was he making money from the state? If yes, then the main punishment is, as I said, fines, and these fines can be from starting from the amount of money embezzled to up to 20 times the amount of money embezzled, and that depended on what exactly had happened. In many cases, it is written that it will be 1/10 of this or twice this or etc. etc. In some cases, it is left to the discretion of the officer concerned. So, for some very serious offences, even death, execution, that is also prescribed. For instance, if an officer actually who is in charge of stores sends out these stores to the enemy king, then that officer is executed. Because this is also a kind of corruption. You give up the resources, you send off the resources of your own kingdom to someone else, and thus you weaken your own kingdom. So this is seen as treason, and the punishment for this is death. So all this is done. All the ways of corruption are laid down. What you have to do after you find this corruption is laid down. How do you find it? Through inspection. So there are regular inspections carried out of all the departments. And remember, the Samahartri has his own people embedded everywhere. In that whole section, I had told you about the Adhyaksh, the Upadhyaksh, and there were other people working with him. One or two of them are spies of the Samahartri, and they will tell him what has happened. Apart from spies, there are informers. Why are they informers? Because they get money. If you inform on somebody, and if certain amount of money is recovered, then you will get 1/6 of that money as your reward. So spies are working for pay, for salary, but these informers are different. So if somebody has seen his boss or somebody doing something and then they decide to go and inform, then they will get 1/6 of the amount which is involved. The spies which are involved here, remember I had told you they were the Sanstha and the Sanchara. Sanstha were those who were in the headquarters and stationed in one place. So it is the Sanstha kind of spies because they are embedded in all parts of the headquarters who are involved in this kind of looking for corruption everywhere. So, it does give you the idea that Kautilya was a most mistrustful person. In his idea of the state, it wasn't as if he said, okay, let's give this person this work to do and fine. No, he really wanted to keep an eye on what was happening. He mistrusted everyone, possibly for good reason, because cases of corruption, according to his formulation, according to what we also see, are absolutely endemic. They cannot be left. And the kind of punishments which I have told you about, fines, and I have told you about execution, but there were also things like dishonor. So, putting that man on a donkey and coloring his face or shaving his hair and making him wander around the entire city or the entire town or village and shouting out his misdeeds. So, complete dishonor. So there was this whole kind of different levels of punishment, but there was not just punishment to deter corruption. What else was there? There was one thing: was good work was rewarded. Good work was rewarded with promotions, honor, money, and if you were on probation, then you would be made permanent. So anyone who did not only was that person not corrupt, but did good work. So created some more resources or collected some more things for the treasury or acted well, did a good job, they were rewarded. So this encouraged good behavior. This encouraged people to be good civil servants because of fines, punishments, death, dishonor, etc. were a deterrence. And this was a carrot and stick. So there were carrots also because you would be given a lot of honor. Now, there was another thing which encouraged people to be true to their work and to be not expropriate money. What was that? High salaries. Very high salaries were paid to government servants. Now, I will give you an example. If we read the Arthashastra and put a lot of things together, what we can understand is in terms of the currency of those days, that was a silver pan. So 45 silver pans could feed a family of four for 1 year. Okay, so remember the number 45. What was the scale of salaries of government servants? It was absolutely huge. So if you start with the inner council, you remember the inner council, the Senapati, the Yuvraj, the Purohit. So all of them and the Queen Mother, they got 48,000 punds per year. So that is like an astronomical amount. And these inner council, I mean, if these people revolted and if your Yuvraj went and joined in with an enemy king because he wanted to be the king instead of you, then you were really in a lot of hot water. So to discourage this kind of thing, the inner council got 48,000. Then the Samahartri and other higher officials, they got 24,000 punds per year. And governors and viceroys, 12,000. I have spoken a lot about Ganikas and the kind of work they did. They got 3,000 pounds per year for working for the king. Then, if we go down a little, lower down in the pecking order, spies got 1,000 pounds per year, and our accountants and auditors got 500 pounds per year. So you see that they are really well paid, and they don't need the money. Not only do they not need the money, there are for them a lot of incentives to keep on working well, because not only are they being paid well, they are being honored, they are thought of as very prestigious people. If we go back and read a bit of the Indica of Megasthenes, which is the Greek source for Chandragupta's time, we will see that he talks of public servants as a very special group and a very prestigious and looked up to kind of group of people in that time and in that age. So all of it, this, somebody had asked me, I don't know whether it was Rohit, about how do you know that all this that you're saying is correct, and what kind of evidence do you have apart from the Arthashastra. And I had told him that we try to put pieces together from many different places. So here, this kind of piece is put together about the situation of the public servants and the way they were thought of and the way they operated. There is a lot in the Indica of Megasthenes. They were a very important part of society, and they were at the top echelons of society. So here we see that both things go together. Corruption is endemic, so many efforts are made to fight it. There are full efforts made to fight it, not only in terms of negative things, but also positive things. So it is the understanding of Kautilya, of human nature, and how to deal with people so as to get the best results from them. Because it is these public servants who have to work and who have to run the bureaucracy. It is not someone else. You have to get work from this very same bureaucracy if the kingdom has to succeed. And this is a very good message for us today. There is a lot of corruption in our public life too. We can also say that corruption is endemic in our public life. But neither are the fines and the punishments that tough, and neither are the rewards and salaries that good. So you have neither the negatives working nor the positives working. So something needs to change. Either make it very tough. Even if our public servants are caught with corruption, what happens? Nothing much. Cases go on and on and on. And even if they lose that case, they may go to jail for 2, 3 years. Then they come out and they enjoy their ill-gotten gains. So there are no fines, there is no punishment. So this kind of thing in one of the states, I think, is it Bihar? A kind of law was tried to be passed where this that all their property will be confiscated. Either it was Bihar or Madhya Pradesh, and I don't know what happened to it. That all their property will be confiscated in case public servants are found to have indulged in corruption. So if this kind of thing becomes difficult to be corrupt, and if you're caught, then you're dead, that kind of thing will work. Or otherwise, make things so positive and make things so good for them that they don't want to be corrupt. The positive part is a little tougher because people are always greedy. So this carrot and stick has to go together, and perhaps it would be a good idea for our public servants and those who make policies to study the system of carrots and stick and kind of try and do something like that today. So I hope that takes care of many of the questions and many of the issues that had been raised by so many people who were there in the past few talks. So now I will move on to today's topic, which is Mitra. So we already have had a little bit of an introduction to Mitra because it is the seventh Prakriti. So just to sum up, we have finished looking at six Prakritis: Swami, Amatya, Janpat, Durg, Dand, Kosh. Actually, it is Durg, Kosh, Dand, but we looked at it in the other way, so Durg, Dand, Kosh. And now we are looking at the last one, which is Mitra or ally. Now, Mitra or ally is the Vijigishu. So I keep using this word Vijigishu, so I will explain what it is. The Vijigishu is the would-be conqueror. This is our king. And this is the mode in which our king of this particular kingdom is setting out both to keep his kingdom at an even keel. Remember that Palan and Poshan, and it is his duty to do both Palan and Poshan, and Yogakshem, that is to sustain what has already been received and also to increase it. So it is this Vijigushu, the would-be conqueror of Prithvi. So see, this is a theoretical concept. So it is not actually going around to actually conquer entire Prithvi. It is the idea of getting more for his people. What is this idea and what can we call it in today's terms? The national interest. So for the Vijigishu or for the whole formulation of Mitra, the national interest, the interest of our kingdom is paramount. That is what has to always be kept in mind. So you are not you're not hanging in the air. Any Vijigishu, any kingdom is living in the world. Living in the world, there are many other kingdoms around you because this entire planet doesn't belong to you. So since there are so many of these kingdoms around you, how do you deal with them? So that is diplomacy, that is international relations, that is strategy, and that is what we will study over here. So, this is often called the Rajmandal theory, and we'll see what the Rajmandal is. It is also very closely related to security because you can be threatened by so many of the other kingdoms around there. They may not all be your friends. So, the issue of defense and the issue of external relations, foreign relations, always these are always tied up together because often you may have to use your army in case you want to dispense with or protect against some threat. You may have to use your army. So these two will come together, and right at the end, you will see how the army is used when analyzing your relations with other countries around you and when you are trying to protect yourself or extend yourself. So I will, whenever I'm saying anything here, remember, this is from the point of view of the Vijigishu. At the end of this talk, I will shift the perspective to, I'll give you some practical examples. So you may think of India as the Vijigishu, you may think of China, you may think of the US, or you may think of Russia. So whenever we shift the Vijigishu, the perspective will change. But for right now, whenever I talk, this currently is from the point of view of the Vijigishu. The state wants to extend its influence, it wants to extend its territory. So, how should it conduct its relations with foreign states? So, there are two or three things here. The one is the theory of Rajamandal, which I'll explain. Then, foreign policy is associated with the six measures of foreign policy, which are called Shadgunyam, which also I will tell you about. And there are four upayas. So, there is a committee of nations. The relations and policy between these committee of nations is through the Shadgunyam, and how to make that policy into a practical action that is done through the four upayas. So let's first understand the Rajmandal. So the Rajmandal is the group of kingdoms of the Vijigishu and all the kingdoms around the Vijigishu. There are two ways in which this has been explained or understood in the Arthashastra. So in one of them, the two views are slightly different. So in one of them, there are 12 kings or states, including our Vijigishu. So apart from him, there is an Ari. Remember the word Ari, it means enemy. Then there is a Mitra, which means friend. Then there is an Ari Mitra, which means friend of the enemy. Then there is a Mitra Mitra, which means friend of the friend. Then there is an Ari Mitra Mitra. This is the enemy of the friend's friend. Then, depending on where your enemy is located, behind you, in front of you, there is a Pashnigraha who is at your back. There's an Akranda who is also at the back. And behind the Pashnigraha, this is, I'm telling you all the names. I don't expect you to either understand or be very able to get very familiar with it, but I think you should just know the 12 names. So there's also an Akrandasar, Madhyam, and Udasin. So in this system, there are 12 states, and the relations between these 12 states are defined by those Shadgunyam and those upayas. However, this is not accepted by all people or all commentators or those who read the Arthashastra. The other one is a far more useful and far more practical theory of the Rajamandal, and that is the theory that I will be explaining in detail today. What is that? According to this, there are four principal states indeed. So forget about all those very complicated 12 ones. There are four states. There is the Vijigishu. We know who the Vijigishu is, the one whose national interest we are interested in. This is the state. We are looking at everything from the point of view of this state. What is this state gaining? This is what we want to know, and this we want this state to gain everything. So this is at the center of our calculations. Then there is an Ari. There is a state which is an enemy of this one, does not like this one at all. Then there is a Madhyam and there is an Udasin. What does Madhyam and Udasin mean? Madhyam is a state which is near the Vijigishu and near the Vijigishu's enemy, and it is larger and stronger than the Vijigishu. So this is called the Madhyam. Remember, Vijigishu and the Ari, they may be of kind of similar stature, but what we call Madhyam is always stronger than our king. Then there is an Udasin. This Udasin is far away from our king. This kingdom is not so much concerned. It's neutral or indifferent, but in terms of power, it is the most powerful. So it is more powerful than the Vijigishu, than the Ari, and also than the Madhyam. So these are the four: the Vijigishu, the Ari, the Madhyam, and the Udasin. All these have one friend and one friend's friend. For the total Rajmandal, there are 12 states in it. Four of these main ones which I told you about, and each of these have a friend and a friend's friend. So there are four sets of three. So this makes 12. Now these 12 can be seen as states, the independent kingdoms. However, it is more useful to think of them as relationships. They are not exactly one state here, one there. Many people who have read the Arthashastra have tried to make a very literal kind of translation of this, and I think they've just made jalebis of themselves, because this one is here and then this state is here, then this state is here, and it doesn't really also make much sense, at least to me. So when I read it, I find this, and as we go along in the next 10-15 minutes, I'll give you some very practical examples of how we can use these as concepts, as kind of chess pieces, and shift them around. And as we shift them around, we get a better and better perspective of what is the chessboard of international relations in front of us, and we can get it from different perspectives. So we can know what we are thinking, we can know what our enemies are thinking, we can know what our friends are thinking, we can know what countries who don't care anything about us are thinking and how they will behave. So these are, I would urge you to think of them as concepts. And wherever, whenever, if you read about the Rajamandal theory, it is called the circle of kings. And they try to actually think of it as a real circle. So they'll give you very complicated diagrams, which is why I'm saying it's a jalebi. They'll give you a very, very complicated diagram. This is here, that is there. I would say discount all that, read it to understand the concepts, but don't think of them as kingdoms. Think of them as relationships. So when we have this whole set of 12, then we have our chessboard kind of laid out. So now, what do we do? How do we construe this chessboard? You know, we can also think that the entire set of relations, because there are two very important kingdoms, the Madhyam and the Udasin, which are the most powerful ones. So is it that this entire Rajmandal is a jostling for power between these two kind of hostile and very powerful kingdoms? The Vijigishu would be one of these two jostling for power. He could be one of the weaker ones. That is why I'm saying keep your concepts fluid, and we can shift around these concepts as we like. When I give you practical examples, it will be a little clearer. But I'll before that, I will actually give you a little more of a background in terms of how this chessboard was dealt with. Now we have 12 states or 12 relationships. Now each of these 12 states can be analyzed in terms of our own Saptanga state theory. So, what does it mean? Each of these 12 states has its own separate prakritis. So, there are, besides the ruler, so you have the other five prakritis. Remember, you don't have Mitra because we are studying Mitra right now. So, remove one, that is Mitra. So, how many prakritis does that give you? 72. So, if you want to make a detailed analysis, say you want to make a detailed analysis of Pakistan or of China, use the Saptanga state theory, use those six prakritis, see what the leadership is like, what the administration is like, how rich or poor they are, what kind of resources they have, what is their defense and external relations, what are the people like, and you will get those countries in a nutshell. So these 72 prakritis will give you that entire chessboard and that entire Rajmandal theory in which we have to operate. So now the chessboard is laid out and the Vijigishu is there in the middle. So what does the Vijigishu have to see first of all? He has to see, look around him and see what do all these people or countries, how are they towards me? How do they operate? Are they friends? Are they enemies? What are they? So Kautilya says that all states will fall in three categories. They will be Aribhavin. Ari, you know, are enemies. So that means they will operate with enmity. They will be Mitrabhavin, which means that they will be pro and positive to the Vijigishu, or they will be Bhrityabhavin. And Bhrityabhavin are those who are vassals. So suppose we just give an offhand example and China is thinking of different countries. So obviously it will think of Pakistan as Bhrityabhavin because Pakistan is more or less a vassal of China. Or if those countries which are completely in the control of or North Korea, it can't do anything without China. So these are like vassals. So it is either Aribhavin, Mitra Bhavin, or Bhritya Bhavin. So you analyze first. The Vijigishu analyzes how are all these people, what kind of relationship do they have with me. Now relations have to be established with every country on this chessboard in this Raj Mandal, in this circle, you have to have relations with all of them because you cannot live in a vacuum. If you don't do something and you are passive, then that other country will do something. So passivity and doing nothing, it is one of the upayas. It is in the Shad Gunyam, but that is also a very kind of pregnant silence. So when you are not doing anything, you are thinking about what to do. It's not that you are asleep and not bothered. You are thinking about what to do. It is like that of a snake poised to strike. It is that kind of silence. So you have to have some kind of relation with all other states. So how are these relations established? They are established through ambassadors or envoys. They are called dutas. They are doots who will be of three different kinds. So there are three types of ambassadors. One is called the Nistrishtat, then Parimitat, and there is the Shasanhar. So the first one, he has full powers. He is the spokesperson, representative of the king. When he goes to any state, he can take decisions and suppose some treaty has to be negotiated or something has to be done, then he can take decisions. Then the second level doesn't have all those many things and maybe a little bit of flexibility. The third one is the Shasanhar. He has absolutely nothing. He can just go there and give a letter from the king that this is what my king wants to do. So these are the three levels of envoys. There is a, a kind of desirability stated that in each state of the Raj Mandal, you must have your ambassadors stationed. So there should be an embassy of our king in each of these states. And you should have relations with each of these states. Remember, some of them are your enemies, but you still have to have an ambassador there because there have to be some relations, there have to be some options open and channels of communication. So the desirability is of envoys and ambassadors in each and every country of the Rajamandal. But sometimes this is not possible, in which case you just send the ambassador as and when needed. So you send the ambassador to do something, then he stays for some time, you decide how long he stays, what kind of negotiations he does, and the ambassador is inviolable. All countries in this Rajamandal, no one will ever attack a Dut. That is one of the basic ethical policies which is part of the Indic tradition. A Dut is never to be attacked. You remember that in the Ramayana, when Ravan becomes very angry with Hanuman and he says, I will kill him. So Vibhishan says that a Dut is never ever to be attacked. And even Ravan, even in his anger, he says, okay, then we'll just cut off his tail and he's going to hate it. So let's burn his tail and cut off his tail. So he will be dishonored. He cannot be killed. In actual fact, even dishonoring a Dut is not done. But that was Ravan. But the person of the envoy is inviolable. So, what is an envoy? What's an ambassador supposed to do? And can I maybe send this shlok to one of the ambassadors today because the duties will be very same. He has to send information about that country to his own king. Then, if there is a treaty, then he has to get it signed and see that that treaty is being followed. He has to consolidate and build up friendships. If there are places where he can see that he can create a fight and the Vijigishu will get some benefit out of it, then he has to create fights between them. Then he also may need to smuggle troops secretly into the foreign state and kidnapping kinsmen of foreign princes for kind of keeping them and making the foreign that foreign power do the bidding of the Vijigishu. So this is something which is frowned on today. Nobody will now say that you kidnap the prime minister's wife or somewhere and then make that country do what we wanted to do. But at the time, it was acceptable. It was very much acceptable and it was done all the time. So they were kept as hostages. I mean, princes also grew up as hostages in enemy kingdoms. Today, this is not at all acceptable. So he also has to be very strong in his loyalty and he has to keep trying to shake the loyalty of the enemy kingdom or the kingdom where he is. These are the kind of long list of things the ambassador has to do. He has to be a really very smart person, diplomatic. He has to be able to convince others about what to do, and he has to try his best to push the national interest of the Vijigishu. So this is as far as we have the chessboard, we have the 12 countries, we have the ambassadors in each and every court, and we have everything set as to what exactly needs to be done. So what is the foreign policy? What are the foreign policy? What is the framework in which foreign policy has to be thought of? So that there are six gunas. So this is called Shad Guna. What are these six gunas? These six gunas are Sandhi, which is making a treaty, then Vigraha, which is hostility, Asan, which is a policy of remaining quiet. But you remember what kind of remaining quiet I said. This is not being passive, but deciding, thinking, and then taking action. So that is Asan. Then there is Yan, which is marching on an expedition. Then there is Sanshray. So this is begging for shelter from another king. This is when you are much weaker than the king you are fighting with. Then there is Vaidi Bhav, the double policy of Sandhi with one king and Vigrah with another. So you see, all possible options are here. Sandhi, peace. Vigraha, hostility. Asan, wait to do something. Yan, fight. And then you have Dvedi Bhav and Sanshray. Sanshray is, surrender. When you can't do anything, it is surrender. And Vedi Bhav is what Kautilya excels in, deception. Say something to one king, say something else to another king, make friends with this one, and then try and get him to do something else with the to the other king. This is what, this is Kautilyan diplomacy at its best, Vedi Bhav. So these are the six ways, six policies. Now, when are you to use all these six policies? The general rule is that if you are weaker than your enemy, then quietly you make a treaty with that enemy. Sandhi. If you are stronger than your enemy, Vigraha. fight. Then if you both are equal in power, then there are, in another part of the Arthashastra, there are certain things given about how you analyze the prakritis and you see what prakriti is doing what and how things may change. So this is asan, when things are at the same level, but you can take advantage and you can do something once the circumstances change. And if you are very, very strong, then you don't even just need to be hostile. Yan, which means an expedition, which means war. This is outright war. If you are very weak, you have to surrender. So that is called Sanshray. And Vedi Bhav is taking help from one source and fighting with the other. So when you are not so strong that you can just decimate the other kingdom, then you take help from someone else. You take and use deception, use your spy system, use your own voice. And as I told you, often, these envoys were also Ganikas, because it was very easy for Ganikas to travel from one kingdom to another. They were artists, they were dancers, they were singers, they were welcome everywhere. So, for example, from Vaishali to Magad or Magad to Vaishali. And these Ganikas would be secret envoys of their own kingdoms. And all these policies of deception, meeting with people, discussions, fights, everything, all this was done by these envoys, often Ganikas. So normally, if you are not confident, then you want to go in for a sandhi. So there is a situation of comparative weakness. So because when you are making a treaty, it's not as if you only get something, you have to also give something. A treaty means compromise, it means adjustment. So, this Sandhi, when if we go back to the Seleucids and the Mauryans, both of them were equally powerful kingdoms. If they had fought with each other, if Chandragupta had fought with Seleucus, who would have won? Nobody knows. So therefore, after using again, I would it will be very nice for me if any of you read book two and then remember this lecture, because all these upayas and all the shad gunyam, all of them I have shown in action in the situation between the Seleucids and the Mauryans. And in the end, because they were not sure about who was going to win, they had made a treaty. Remember, Chandragupta gave 500 elephants and they entered into marriage relations, the Seleucids and the Mauryans. And the Seleucids ceded a lot of territory. So Sandhi means that you have to give something and or take something, and there are many different kinds of Sandhis. I will not go into the technical details of all of them, but they are given in terms of whether you have to give money, whether you have to give territory, whether you have to give land. So Chanakya also says that if you have to enter into this treaty and later you can wriggle out of it, do it. If you are weak, enter into this treaty, and when you are strong, you overthrow that king and just throw away the treaty. So you remember, there is a certain win at all costs kind of attitude over here. Totally win at all costs kind of attitude. So that is there. Sometimes you have to give hostages. So when there is a treaty between hostile powers, then you may have to send the prince, or you take the prince of another kingdom. So there are ways of treating these. And again, Chanakya says, okay, you send your hostage, but smuggle him out back as soon as you can. So you are not supposed to sit quietly and accept your defeat in any way. And even if you have entered into a sandhi because you felt that, okay, things are kind of parallel, the minute you feel that you are stronger, break the sandhi. That is what Kautilya says. It is a temporary measure to be abrogated once you have grown in strength. So once you grow in strength, either you go for Vigraha or you go for Yan. And hopefully you will never have to go for Sanshray, because that is like total surrender. So now, what about the policy of Vigraha? Vigraha is a state of hostility. It has an offensive as well as a defensive purpose. Now, if any of you take any interest in India's foreign policy and security policy, and if you have listened to what Mr. Doval has had to say on India's current policies, have you heard his concepts of defensive offense and offensive defense? Both of these draw very strongly from the policy of Vigraha, because Vigraha is exactly this. You can be defensively, okay, I'll go into a little bit of detail about this when we can consider the surgical strikes, and the policies of the war. But suffice it to remember that defensive offense and offensive defense draw from the policy of Vigraha, which can be both offensive as well as defensive. Now, Asan, I told you, is just you just waiting quietly. You're hoping that your enemy will become weaker, will get involved in some other war, find himself in some difficulties, and then you can swoop. You are just waiting for your enemy to become weak. Now, yarn is very straightforward. If you feel that you are so much stronger, that your army is much stronger, you fight with that kingdom and you finish off that kingdom. You do not have to be a person, you can't be an Asur Vijayan that you decimate that country and despoil it and start enslaving people, etc. No, you have to be a Dharma Vijayan. There is this concept of war, this concept of ethical war needs to be understood and drummed in. And there is something about, there is a Western philosophy about just war. So we have our own policy of Dharma Vijay. And all these things really need to be understood in the context of each other, the Western philosophy of war and ours. I'm hoping somebody is doing this somewhere. Let's see. So you can also do one more kind of yarn, which is Sambhuya yarn, which means you gather a lot of kings together and then you march on someone. When Chandragupta wanted to take over the kingdom of Magad from Dhananand, he had made an alliance of 5 kings and he had marched on Magad and stopped at the borders with these 5 kings. It's a separate matter that in the end it was through deception and it was through creating dissension in the royal family that an almost, if not fully, bloodless coup was carried out by Chanakya and Chandragupta, and they actually then claimed the throne of Magad. But this Sambhuya Yan was something which was done, and interestingly, the younger Paurav, the nephew of that Paurav who had fought with Alexander, he had then become the king of that Puru kingdom. He was one of the allies of Chandragupta in this Sambhuyayan, and there was the king of Punjab, and there was the king of Kashmir. So all this is from Mudra Rakshas. So this was written by Shudrak, and it is a kind of historical fiction, a historical document in a sense, display of how Chandragupta had actually taken over the kingdom of Magad. So I'm just giving you practical examples of these things so that we know, when these were done and we can understand them a little bit better. The policy of Sanshaya is for the weak king. If there's, you just become a vassal, a protege of the other stronger king, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can, of course, go and hide in your own fort. So that is the importance of the fortified capital. Either you go to the king and kind of surrender, or you just go and quietly hide in your own fort till things become better. And again, remember, even for Sanshaya, Kautilya will never say that it's Sanshaya forever. Just wait and see if you can improve things. So, does this not again remind you of Shivaji Maratha? Didn't he do this a number of times? He withdrew and he waited to become stronger and then he came out fighting. So, a Kautilyan analysis of Shivaji Maharaj makes for a very interesting reading, and I think some people in Pune have done it, and it makes for very fascinating reading. Dvaiti Bhav is not actually a separate policy. It is a mixture of different things. So you make friends with someone that is Sandhi, who have hostilities with someone which is Vigraha, and you use all these policies to your own interests. The purpose of making a Sandhi is to get troops or money so that you can fight with the one with whom you have a Vigraha. What is the purpose of all these 6 policy measures, the Shadgunyam? It is to secure an increase in one's power, principally at the cost of your natural enemy. So you have to decide who is your natural enemy. For India, who is our natural enemy? Is it Pakistan? Is it China? Is it someone else? So these things have to be decided at the policy level of the foreign policy establishment. Then only can you consider the chessboard properly, the Rajmandal properly, when each and every country is placed in the proper slot. if you do not place all countries in their proper slots, the policies that you follow are not going to be correct. And hopefully, we'll have time to discuss a little bit of that. Now, the last thing that I'll tell you is that apart from these policies are comprehensive, large policies. There are also four upaya. Upaya is a more direct thing. It's a way in which you do something. So that is Saman, Dan, Bhed, and Dand. And it's very familiar to us. Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed is more or less like a, lokokti, that all four things can be done. The first two can be used to subjugate weak kings, and the last two for overcoming strong kings. And you do understand what it is. Uh, the four things are these four upayas and the six gun. You can see that there is some kind of similarity between one or two of these concepts and some of these concepts. So it is said that the introduction of upay is secondary to the policy. So there is Shadgunyam and there is upay, which is more important. The Shadgunyam is more important. Now, the idea of using all this for Vijay, that we have already discussed, Dharma Vijay and Lobh Vijay and Asur Vijay, we've already discussed all this. But what, in what way should all these policies actually be followed? Uh, who should you use what for? Here is where the link between defense and external affairs comes in. How expeditions are to be planned, and how the strengths and weaknesses of the king of your enemy, how they are to be decided. And when it is a weak king, then you should do this. If it is a strong king, you should do this. So it is here that defense and external relations come together. So the Rajamandal, the chessboard, the six gunas, and the four upayas. This is the theory. A little bit of a practical exposition, which will be more interesting perhaps. So now we have the Vijigishu, the Ari, the Madhyam, and the Udasin. Let's try and put our own world into these categories. We'll start with making India as the Vijigishu. Now, if I were talking to you, say, maybe 5 years ago, when the geopolitical situation was very different, 5, 6 years ago, we could have India as the Vijigishu. Maybe 6, 7 years ago, we did not see China as that much of a threat. So, who was our biggest Ari? That was Pakistan. And at that time, China was kind of posing as a Madhyam. It had more power than us, but it was not actually our enemy. It was there near us, and it was somebody. It was somebody who was not openly hostile and had not declared itself as an enemy state of India. So that was Madhyam. And Udasin, who was the Udasin? It was the US. We could put it like that because the US was the most powerful state then. It is a little far from India. It was not all that, it is not day to day concerned with what India is doing. Things have changed now, but then it was not. So there we had it: India, Pakistan, China, and US in this particular system. And then we can start thinking about what method should we use against Pakistan. So what should we analyze for that? We should analyze relative strengths and weaknesses. We should see whether it is a stronger state or whether it is a weaker state, who will come and help Pakistan in case we attack. And then we could also analyze our Pakistan policy through the lens of Shadgunyam and see whether we were doing Sandhi, Vigraha, Asan, Yan, Sanshray, Dvaidi Bhav. So if you do analyze it and if we look back at 40, 50 years, what we see is that we are lurching between one policy and another policy. We have not been able to fix the policy, had not been able to. Now I think we are definitely in the Vigraha situation. So now it is clear, it is Vigraha. Earlier, we would make some overtures to Pakistan, some kind of treaty, some kind of discussion. Okay, no. So then we'll say, okay, like in 2010, army will be nose to nose. Then suddenly we'll say, no, okay, we are going to allow some other, the US will intervene, and we'll say, okay, we'll start talking to Pakistan. So we were lurching from policy to policy, and it was not based on the relative strength and weakness of India and Pakistan. So that is one way in which we can analyze the chessboard in front of us in terms of the Rajamandal theory. Now, today, if India is a Vijig issue, it seems very clear that China is the Ari. Now, if China is the Ari, who is the Madhyam and Udasin? Remember, the Madhyam and the Udasin have to be stronger than both India and China. So you can have the Udasin as the US, perhaps, because it is still much stronger than either India or China. Or, well, or at least, if not much stronger, still stronger. The army is still bigger than China's army. But then who will be the Madhyam? Can we put the EU as the Madhyam? Will it be possible? Can we say that the EU is more powerful than China? Perhaps not. So here, what situation do we have? We have a situation where the Madhyam and the Udasin, that is the most important states and the most powerful states on the chessboard, have now become hostile to each other. So this is the perfect Kautilyan scenario where there are two main big countries hostile to each other, and they are trying to get most of the countries in their own side so that they become more powerful and they can beat each other. So this is the kind of thing which is happening in geopolitics at the moment. The US and China are competing with each other. And what is a new development that has happened? The Quad. So this is the attempt of the US to build up on what? To build up on its mitras. On its mitra, that means its allies, the friends of its allies. It is the attempt of the US to build up a kind of concentrated group or a coordinated group against China. What is the advantage of using these categories in a fluid way? Because you can also think of different countries as the Vijig issues. Now, suppose you think of South Korea as the Vijig issue. Then who is the Ari of South Korea? North Korea. Which country is the Madhyam? China. And which country is the Udasin? The United States. So you see that different parts of geostrategy can be understood using these models. And if you use these models, then try to see which of the policies you use, some very useful foreign policy conclusions can be drawn. Or you can think of Russia as our own Mitra. And if you think of Russia as our Mitra, China is Russia's Mitra. So through that definition, can China become our Mitra? So you see, this is a chessboard. Pieces are moving all the time. You can move them and you can get new perspectives into the entire chessboard of international relations. And it is a pity, it is a great pity that our foreign policy establishment does not seem to be at all ready to do this. I have had discussions with people who I know in the MEA and, because I am also an ex-bureaucrat. They're just not ready for this. But about a month ago, I think the Prime Minister gave a speech where he said that Kautilyan policies and Kautilya must be read and must be used. So now I am hoping for some change. I hope that this kind of very rudimentary but interesting analysis of the Rajamandal, the chessboard of the 12 countries, and the Vijigishu, Ari, Madhyam, and Udasin has given you an idea of how useful Kautilyan politics, Kautilyan international relations is in terms of analyzing a country in its prakritis, analyzing it in relation to yourself, and then arriving at actual concrete actions. This is what is needed. This is why I think that Kautilyan needs to be studied. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
So when as I think this is true of everyone, there was a long sigh which I was, at every point that you were making. We had so much knowledge, we had so much wisdom. So my question is, it might not be exactly in your remit of studies, but from what information you've gathered after Chandragupta Maurya, would it be fair to say that from Ashoka onwards, these policies were not really followed? Or did any empire follow them? Did anyone follow them
very
in
much,
the right way.
very much.
And who would they be? That's
So the two main ones I keep mentioning them are Shivaji Maharaj and the Vijayanagar kingdom. And actually, the Chinmay University, I think, Chinmay University has been doing studies on the Saptang state, and they have had discussions and analysis. And I don't know whether you heard of or you know about Professor Gauri Mahulikar. She is somebody who has actually mentioned an analysis, Kautilyan analysis of Shivaji Maharaj, also in terms of the letters that he used to write to his ministers, and also the Vijayanagar kingdom, also the Panjali. Ashok was an aberration, and he just went off into his own thing, and perhaps he wrecked the Mauryan Empire. But you see, after that, a number of other kings and a number of other kingdoms came in. The Cholas also. They many of the principles that they followed, because some of the texts which are there in Tamil, we tend to think as they're totally different, but they're not. The principles contained in them and the principles contained in many of the Sanskrit texts are the same. So it would not be true to say that Kautilyan ideas have not been followed. They have most certainly been followed. And it really needs to be brought out. For example, we need to do an analysis of the relationship of the Guptas with their different allies, friends, neighbors. How did they deal with them? And if you do an analysis of these, you will see that Kautilyan principles have been at the base of the success of almost all the kingdoms that you can think of, almost all the Indic kingdoms that you can think of. So very much, and I hope Deepanjali that I myself will be able to write a few papers on this, and I hope that some of the other people who I know and who I have got in touch with will be able to do something so that this kind of analysis can be done and we can present the results. It's an area of research. See, right now, nobody even studies Shadgunyam and Rajamandal seriously. Forget about analyzing anything. So once they are studied seriously, then the analysis will follow.
Just one observation. That means, would it be fair to say then that we lost out on all this after independence, or say during the Mughal period? How did this?
Definitely after independence, because a decision was made, a clear, coherent decision was made that we will not look back into our past. We have the great Jawaharlal Nehru to thank for this, who decided that whatever was in the past was bad for India. He's on record as saying that all these traditional things led to 3,000 years of poverty and led to 3,000 years of defeat. I don't know where he got that 3,000 years of defeat and poverty from. I have no clue. But there was a definite decision whether you take the Ministry of External Affairs, whether you take the Ministry of Defense, whether you take any of the institutions that we have for defense studies, defense research. It is only in the past 5, 7, 10 years that people have started thinking again. There was a clear cut decision to never read anything because they were all Brahmanical, Sanskrit, exploitative documents, and who's going to read it in the modern India where dams are the temples of modern India and all that other kind of nonsense which was spouted. So there was a tragic, absolutely clearly made decision for which we have paid in the past 60, 70 years.
Sunita ji, you mentioned Dr. Gauri Mahulikar. We recently had a lecture by her on Bhumi Suktam.
Yes. I've never seen it and I have to see it. So I got in touch with her about the Saptang state, and she has put me in touch with a few other people, and we are hoping to, do something together. Because she's quite an expert on this. I listen to her a lot. So she's an expert on lots of things, but also on this.
I've got two questions, one in a historical context, one in a contemporary context. So the historical one first, and this is a direct quotation from Sitaram Goel about the sort of negative role of Arthashastra in Hindu history. And so I'll just read out the excerpt to you. So it says, the failure of the Hindu cultural vision had serious consequences. They failed to organize a collective effort to guard the frontiers of Bharatavarsha. Hindu princes had by now taken a deep dose of Kautilya's Arthashastra, which had become a prime part of their political education. In this sterile statecraft, centered on the politics of the Mandala Yoni. One's neighbor was always an enemy, and the enemy of an enemy was always a friend. Hindu princes, therefore, failed to hang together in the face of a common calamity. In the event, they were hanged separately. So this is the historical part. So what do you think about the
Well,
role, whether negative or positive, of Arthashastra in Hindu history?
I am sorry to say this quote means that, with due respect, Sitaram Goyal either did not read the Arthashastra or did not understand it. This whole thing, this sterile statecraft, that is exactly the understanding I was warning against, where they make jalebis of kingdoms and put one in front and put one in the back, etc., etc. Nowhere does Kautilya militate against getting together to fight a common enemy. Guarding the frontier is the main aim of the kingdom. So, to not guard the frontier, to not make an alliance, I just spoke about the Sambhuyayan, and I just spoke about Dwedi Bhav, and I just spoke about Sandhi, and I just spoke about treaties. What are all these? These are getting together with people and fighting against a common enemy. I have no clue why anyone would like to misquote, misunderstand, and blame the Arthashastra for this. This sterile statecraft is not what the Arthashastra is about. I mean, I cannot be stronger in my adjuration to all of you to not go in for whatever people have said. Don't even go in for what I am telling you. Read it for yourself and then see whether all these sterile things are there or whether there is some useful thing which can be used.
Okay. So the other question relating to contemporary situation is that, uh, I mean, this kind of gradation between powers might have been okay for most of human history, but right now, how relevant is it when you are surrounded by two nuclear armed neighbors, and you yourself are nuclear armed? So, do these calculations apply in non-conventional warfare like that?
No, so are you saying that the relative power of nations is divorced from its nuclear capability? When you consider how powerful a nation is, there are many factors that you consider. They were different during the time of Kautilya, they are different today, but they are under the same rubric, under the same head of power. So, one part of that, one aspect is nuclear deterrence. So I don't understand why you are separating nuclear deterrence from the amount of or the analysis of the power that a country has. If you study if you want to think of Pakistan, for example, then we will see, okay, how powerful is Pakistan in relation to us? We will consider everything. And when we will consider the seven Prakritis, when we consider the Prakriti of Dand, today's Dand includes nuclear weapons. So you will analyze it in that way. And non conventional warfare, in many ways, the technological parts of it are absolutely new. You know, maybe surveillance equipment or the kind of fighter jets, etc., that we have. But Kautilya has many, many methods and many, many ways of human non conventional warfare, psychological warfare, which are still very, very relevant today. The changes in technology, the changes in the way the army operates are obviously stark. We are not living 3,000 years ago. But it is my contention that the heads under which we study it, the Prakritis, they remain the same. And any new thing that you may say, like nuclear weapons are new, but they will come under one or the other Prakriti and can be analyzed like that. The sad part is that it has not been done as yet. So we don't know that if we do this analysis, what will be the result. But well, you've given me another idea. Perhaps I will do it.
I ordered your book today, so I'll be reading.
Oh, great, very good. I hope you'll order the next one also. So a lot of what I've told you, Dwedi, Bhav, Yan, Asan, Vigraha, you're going to see all that in the fight between the Seleucids and the Mauryans.
And the design is also wonderful. It's not like I don't know what design it is. It is
Yes,
really cool.
there is a very talented young artist who has done that. So I will convey it to her.
I thought it's a print, but you can feel the all the design.
So for that, Rolly Books is to be given the credit. I will convey it to my editor and publisher.
And also, I watched your some of the YouTube videos.
Good.
They are really like the production wise, it is the ultimate. Great. Not
Thank you, Rohit.
yeah, quality wise.
Thank you.
And my question is like, this was 2,500 to 3,000 years back, the Kautilya Awards.
Yes.
And I thought
Rohit, since you have asked this question, let me give an answer of an aspect I have not touched at all, which is the chronology of the Mauryans.
Sure.
It is a highly contested thing in the field of historiography. I myself have written a couple of papers on how the current date of 2300 years ago may not be exactly correct. So, whether it is 2300 years ago or 3500 years ago or a little earlier, there are very solid arguments for and against it. But yes, roughly thousands of years sounds good.
before all the religion came, Abrahamic religion came, we can assume like that.
Yes, certainly, certainly, certainly.
Okay, my question is like, I thought Indic education will like make the society more contributing to the society, but you told there was like everywhere there were checks and balances for the corruption. More education will tend to the more corruption.
See, that's a very difficult question of human nature. Are we saying that people who are, suppose somebody has finished a doctorate and then joined the public services, they are less likely to be corrupt than somebody who's done a BA? I don't really think so. I have not seen any evidence in public life to say that people who are more educated are less corrupt. I don't think there is any correlation between the two. Education is not what corruption depends on. It depends on greed.
No, because the Indic education will actually focus on
Okay. So you mean that there will be character development, and through
right.
that character development, if you are taught proper dharma or ethics, then there will be less of corruption. Yes, I tend to agree with you. Although
I
the
thought the solution for all the problem might be if we move to the Indic education system. So that might reduce the corruption as well as because it is more of not bhukti, it is moving towards the mukti, right?
I tend to agree with you, Rohit. I feel that if we start thinking in terms of dharma, arth, kam, moksha, if we start thinking in terms of dharma and ethics and teaching ourselves, our children, and everyone, dharma in its real sense, and dharma as it is expounded in our own Hindu tradition, I tend to agree with you. I think it will give an injection of ethics into society, which is very badly needed. Values and ethics will be injected into society. So I tend to agree with you.
What are the like future plans for us? We need maybe some kind of course from you or something. I'll be interested to.
I do conduct. I mean, I do take courses, Rohit, on these same subjects. So just keep an eye out on my Twitter timeline and Facebook. I do put it there. In fact, I have taken a 13-week course on the Arthashastra for Indic Academy and for MIT SVS. I also teach all these things that I have spoken to you about at MIT SVS in Pune. So maybe you can join one of the future courses over there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for the great
Thank you,
talk.
Rohit. Thank you for being a very interactive and interested part of the audience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Namaste, ma'am. Thank you for giving us yet another interesting peep
Thank you
into
for
the past.
contributing it.
So I've got a couple of questions, ma'am. The first one is talking about the Arthashastra and the episode on the wars and the strategy for that and all. So is this relatable to the Art of War by Sun? There is a Chinese author.
In a way, it is, because all of them, whether it be Machiavelli or whether it be Sun Tzu or whatever, they all have their own ideas about these basic constituents of kingdom and what to do in relation with others. But there has been a lot of comparison with Machiavelli's The Prince and Kautilya's Arthashastra, which I think is a very useless thing because Machiavelli comes from a completely different tradition. Sun Tzu, you will be very happy to learn that Sun Tzu is taught in our defense academies, but Kautilya is not. So, what can I say? The comparison between Sun Tzu and Kautilya has not been done as yet. Again, a field for future research.
So I happened to read a portion of an old book from written by John Marshall, the archaeologist, and it was about Takshashila, and he wrote something which I would want to quote, and if you can confirm if it was there prevalent in those times. So he basically writes that, and he's quoting the companions of Alexander. So he writes that polygamy and practice of sati were in vogue in those times, and that the girls which were too poor to be wedded off were exposed for sale in the marketplace, and that the bodies of the dead were thrown to the vultures. So this is what he is little bit written about those
Well,
times.
I say this everywhere. Forget what these dead white men have written about India. There are scores of dead white men who have written scores of stuff. Just ignore it. We need to do all this afresh. Polygamy, yes, it was there. Polygamy is very much practiced. Sati, no. And for that, again, I will refer you to the works of Meenakshi Jain, you can read her books and she'll explain this in really very excruciating detail. That sati was not like something that everyone was doing. It was a ritual which was done under specific special circumstances. There may have been one or two instances of it which was done in a particular way for a particular reason. It was not that every woman was jumping into the fire. And as for bodies thrown to the vultures, I don't know, perhaps he took a look at the Parsis. I don't know. And what else? Women being sold, what did you say? Women being sold in the marketplace. Wrong. There was
Yeah,
no buying and selling.
yeah, yeah.
No
Okay,
buying and selling
okay.
of slaves in India.
Okay. Because he was quoting Alexander, even though I do not believe much into it, but continuing from yesterday's question, I was interested in that war between Porus and Alexander. I just tried to search over the net. So I came across this book where he was talking about Takshashila. And
From Alexander, as in, I mean, Alexander did not write any book. Which of his scribes do you mean?
no, he just mentioned that from the extant accounts of Alexander's expedition based on writings of his own companions and contemporaries.
Oh, okay.
So,
So, Megasthenes, and there were a couple of.
yeah, yeah. And another fact that I learned while I was reading a little bit yesterday, that Takshashila was ruled by no less than 7 dynasties over a period of probably 1,000 years. So
Yes, that's not surprising at all.
yeah,
Especially because, well, things changed a lot in the northwest. And Takshashila was ruled by, at the time when Chandragupta came to power, it was ruled by Ambi. And Ambi had become a vassal of Alexander. Before that, it had been ruled by somebody else, and there was also rule by Greek governors. So Alexander had taken over that region, and he had left his own governors to rule over there. There is a little bit about all this in my first book, Urnabi 1, about Takshashila and what happened to Takshashila. Yes, this part is true. But normally, Sukesh, please don't read books by these dead white men who wrote when the empire was at its height. John Marshall is a person who has excavated remains from the Gupta period, picked up Gupta coins, made a little bracelet out of them, and given them to his girlfriend. So this is the kind of respect he had for Indian artifacts. So I have no respect for what these people did. I think we need to redo all of them. We need to revisit everything. So if you read something, don't believe it. If he tells you Justin said this, Strabo said this, then go to that book by Justin. Read what Justin said. See how far Justin's sources were justified. How far Strabo's sources were justified. Because a lot of these Greek people write a lot of stuff because they themselves, Strabo had read somewhere in some book that this was true, so he writes it down in his book also. So there is a lot of investigative and detective work to be done to reach the actual source of what seems to have become very common knowledge. To do that, don't
sure,
stop
man.
reading this. Go to primary sources. I think if there's one message I want to give for history buffs, please go to primary sources.
Sure,
Difficult.
ma'am.
We don't know
I,
we don't know Roman, but still.
I mean, I just came across this, so I thought let me confirm with you
And
who
let me
would
give you
be.
another suggestion. In case you really want to know what Alexander's companions wrote about their trip to India, There's a series of translations by a person called McCrindle, J. McCrindle. He has translated the works of Strabo, Megasthenes, Justin, everyone, and you can find both the volumes, I think, even on archive.org. Read that. If you don't find it on archive.org, you'll find that book on Amazon.
Sure, ma'am.
J.W. McClinty. He has
Sure,
translated
ma'am.
everything which is available, written by the companions of Alexander, much of which is lost and has only been repeated by others. So he has translated all those.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much.
See, the Arthashastra was written in a time when the world was full of monarchs. How would it apply to a democratic setup, especially when there is jockeying for power within the country, between different formations, and the policy of viewing, ever-changing enemies and friends. So, how would that be applicable to internal governance?
You are talking about ever-changing enemies and friends within the domestic context, or are you talking about the international context?
It's purely domestic. It's purely domestic because it is applicable to a monarchy where there is a king.
Are you saying that today, because there is democracy, there is strong domestic politics, and it has an impact on foreign policy?
No, purely in the sense of, never mind the foreign policy, purely in sense of governance of the country. Does that make, is Arthashastra still applicable in a domestic sense? Because Arthashastra also tells how the king should keep control over his domains, before thinking about the other people.
Democracy, monarchy, so that is Ganatantra and Rajtantra. And what makes Indian Rajtantra different from this idea of monarchy that you are mentioning right now is the whole idea of consultation, democratic consultation between the king and his council of ministers. And those ministers were not elected by the people, but they represented a good group of people. And the king was not a monarch, as in he did not exercise absolute power. I'll do what I like and everyone else can go to hell off with your head. The whole essence of Indian Rajtantra is consultation. The essence of Indian Rajtantra is the influence of Ganatantra on monarchy. Also, during the time the Arthashastra was written, there were also Ganatantras in the Indian subcontinent, and these Ganatantras, how their politics is to be dealt with, how they are to be dealt with, is also discussed in the Arthashastra. So, although it is not democracy of the modern day, there is a kind of proto-democracy which is also discussed in the Arthashastra. If you would like to read a little more, of course, read the Arthashastra. I have also written 2 or 3 articles on this, which you will find in Swarajya magazine. So, the idea of monarchy as one person taking all decisions is not correct. In the Indian concept of monarchy, in the Indian concept of the king exists as a person who represents all the people, lives and works for the people, and consults with his administration before taking decisions. I also suggest that if you have not listened to the first talk, go back and listen to it, because some of these things are mentioned in that talk. Not something which you can like close your eyes and apply today. You have to be very careful. You have to read it and see what are the principles. Which principles do we need? Which principles are those that come from our own indigenous genius, from our own character, our own bhav. Therefore, they suit us more. When we import things, when you wear someone else's clothes, they don't fit very well. So wear your own clothes, but wear them properly and see where they fit. Change them, change the measurement if they don't fit. You don't have to, just wear ill-fitting clothes simply because they are yours. You can change the measurement. Therefore, apply whatever can be applied, should be applied, needs to be applied, not blindly.